Welcome to the Timeless Marketing Podcast with Brian Kurtz, your connection to insights from some of the top direct response marketing minds on the planet.
Hey, it's Brian Kurtz here, host of the Timeless Marketing Podcast. Today's episode is a clip from one of the 2-hour calls inside Titan's Accelerator, my private mentorship program for direct response marketers. Before we get to that, I have one question for you. Do you have a marketing insurance policy? If you don't, you need one. And that's why I created Titan's Accelerator, which is one of the most giving communities and serves as the de facto board of advisors and marketing insurance policy for over 250 of the best and brightest direct response marketers, copywriters, media buyers, marketing agencies, senior executives, anyone in direct response marketing who is committed to growing and scaling their business. The bottom line, you don't have to grow your business alone. And you don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars either. Titan's Accelerator is 1/10 of the price of most groups of its kind. I know because I hosted a group that was over $20,000 a year. If you want to see how Titan's Accelerator can help you grow and scale your specific business, go to briankurtz.net/help. That's BRIANKURTZ.net/help. And with a private membership, you'll receive access to the full presentation from today's episode, along with the Q&A and discussion that followed. As an added bonus, you'll receive access to a vault filled with many more private calls just like this one. Again, if you want to see if Titan's Accelerator is a fit for you with no obligation, go to briankurtz.net/help. That's BRIANKURTZ.net/help. And feel free to email me directly. I respond to every email with questions about this episode or just to say hi at brian@briankurtz.net. Now on to today's episode.
The last Titans Mastermind live meeting before shutdown, before the world fell apart in COVID 2020, was in January of 2020, and we were in Austin, Texas. We ran the Titans Mastermind. I ended up staying. Carla stayed with me too. We stayed an extra few days, and my friend David Gonzalez, who kind of owns Austin, and he has the internet marketing party, and he's just a great guy. And so he told me, "Oh, you're going to be in Austin. You'll come to the internet marketing party. You'll speak." And the day before, I don't know what he called it. He called it a think tank, but basically it was like these young, aggressive, direct marketing rock stars want to grill you on a hot seat. That's not how he presented it. He said, "Oh, it'll be a think tank, Brian." And so I'm in a room with people like Mercer and trying to think who was there. Not Troy Erickson, but Kurt Maley. Who else is in the group, Mercer?
There's a bunch, like Jonathan Herbert sometimes is on those.
Who's the copywriter, the world-class copywriter? I think John also.
It could be, yeah. Because what he'll do is he goes out and he caters the group to whoever the speaker is, so it kind of changes each time.
He couldn't find anybody to cater to me, so
that's what it was.
So, and it was great. I mean, they basically wanted me to talk about my business model, and we came up with some great ideas out of that. And I think we came up with improvements to this program and Accelerator from that meeting. And so I met Mercer. I thought he was, and I think we followed up with sending some books to many of the guys who were there, and just a great meeting. And then Teresa, just recently, she was at Traffic and Conversion, and she said, "I went to a presentation. It was the best thing that she heard at Traffic and Conversion," which is saying a lot because that's a place where you get the best speakers, the best content. And she said Mercer did something that he has to do for Titans Accelerator, basically. And I said, reach out to him. She did. He fortunately said yes. He wasn't too turned off by that hot seat he did for me. and he thought that I'd have a legitimate group, and I do. Um, and that's why he's here, and he's going to talk about. It's sort of like Measurement 2022, which is a great topic to lead off the new year too, because we're direct response marketers. We live measurement. Measurement is all about what we do, and Mercer has some great insights on this. And again, as I said in my post, I said, I really trust Teresa because she's a tough sell. I mean, not you can't get by her, and if she says it's good, I know it's going to be good, and I know Mercer is a rock star, as I said. So, Mercer, the floor is yours. If you want to share a screen, feel free, and go for it.
All right, everybody should be able to see my screen at this point, so we should be good. All right, so we're going to talk about how to measure marketing, essentially, right? That's what everyone's trying to figure out is what's working and what's not. And there's been a massive amount of changes over the years. Measurement's one of those things that changes quite a bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to start with this slide. I start with this every time. This group is obviously keen on this particular topic, this idea of one thing. I'm going to cover a lot. I'm kind of famous in my presentations for giving a lot of different things. The reason I do that is so every time you rewatch them, which you should, it's good this is recorded. So when you rewatch it, you will pick up another new one thing. In order, especially with measurement, it can get complicated quickly. If you've ever jumped into Google Analytics and you've got batted around by that thing and you're like, oh, let's come back in a couple of years and try to figure this thing out. That's because you tried to do probably too much too soon and you didn't have enough muscle yet to work the program. And so it can feel like that. We just take too much too soon to get overwhelmed and frustrated and shut down. When I'm going through this presentation, it may feel like that at certain points where you're like, okay, I just barely hung onto this one thing and now there's another thing. Don't worry about the other thing. It'll be there when you need it. That's part of the reason I put it in here. So again, you can rewatch this each time, pick up another new one thing. But the things you'll be looking for, we're going to focus on three main topics. The first is the mindset. You might find just your one thing there. And when you have something that you've heard in a different way, to somebody's point earlier, they were talking about the epiphany, right? That's what we're looking for. Something where you're like, oh, I've never quite heard it like that, but now all of a sudden it makes sense. Or now, okay, I just learned I should go do this thing. I'm going to start doing this one thing. You focus on that, you build a skill, and then you come back, make it better later, right? And rewatch the workshop to pick up something from it. So maybe you'll find that one thing in the mindset. We talk about that, how to look at this, because that's where most people go wrong. The second thing is we're going to talk about the superstorm. This is the stuff that's getting all the headlines for those that are around in this world. Last year, when Facebook and Apple were getting into their little tiff, we'll talk about that and kind of why that's happening and what you can do about it. And then finally, we're going to end with a framework. This is a framework you will be able to use. We're going to go to this in intricate detail of the framework. So you can actually start to use this in your own organization as well. And you'll actually be able to use it today if you wanted. So we'll go through each of those steps. And again, your job is really to kind of find that one thing that you can take action on. Don't worry about everything. You don't need to know everything. Just focus on the one thing that you pick up from this one time that you're watching this, then practice that skill, come back, rewatch it. You'll pick up another new one thing. All right. So very quickly, my origin story at a high level is I started teaching WordPress. That's how I got into digital marketing, was creating a WordPress site to show people how to do WordPress sites. And that very quickly led into people saying, well, this is great, but it's a lot of work. Can you just build my WordPress site? And I was like, all right. So I learned this thing called outsourcing, and we created a little agency. And so we started building WordPress sites. But I wanted to differentiate as an entrepreneur because everybody was, starting to get into this world. At least it felt like that. And I didn't want to be a commodity. So at the time, there was this new thing in the US, this is how long ago it was, called CRO, otherwise known as conversion rate optimization. So we would build the WordPress site, optimize the WordPress site for the client. It separated us out, and it was a pretty good product. But in order to optimize, you of course have to measure. You have to understand how to use measurement tools. So I could say, here's what your opt-in rate is, or here's what your conversion rate is, and here's what we're able to do now, and all that fun stuff. So that's what led to measurement. And the rest, of course, is history. Not exactly true. For me in particular, this is my own personal journey. The real aha moment that I had in this whole measurement concept was that this is not about tools. And that's a big thing. It's kind of a fairly recent thing for me. It's not about learning Google Analytics. It's not learning about, Google Data Studio, Google Tag Manager, or Adobe, or Wicked Reports, or any of the tools that are out there that help with measurements. Not about that. It's all about your mindset. Everything starts with this mindset. And if you don't have this particular part down, it doesn't really matter what tool you have. You're not going to be able to properly use it. One way to think about this is if you learn how to swing a hammer, it doesn't mean that you can automatically build a house. right? Building a house requires other things. And in order to build a house, you must use a hammer. But just knowing how to use a hammer doesn't mean that you can build a house. It's all about this mindset. So in order to talk about this and to think this through, if we look at this picture and you think, okay, what are these two people doing right now? These two individuals doing? It's not a trick question. They're just having a conversation. Same thing here, just having a conversation. A couple people having a conversation. Still, just a couple people having a conversation. But to take that a step further, what we're really looking at is somebody hopefully listening and somebody responding. And then maybe it flips back and forth. But it's all a conversation is. It's just listening and responding. That's it. Listening and responding. And that's an important point, because when we look at this slide and we say, what's going on here? Yes, there's a conversation, but now it's kind of more probably up our alley, is that this is a conversation to hopefully lead to a transaction. So now you've got a salesperson, you've got a customer. They're in this case having a conversation. The salesperson's probably asking questions, leading, and they're responding based upon what that customer is saying, what that prospect is saying. So they're trying out, maybe it's the driver. Oh, you don't need a driver. Let's look at the putters or whatever it is, trying to get them to do some practice swings. Ultimately, their job is to get them to go to the checkout and purchase that. But it's still just a conversation. It's still just listening and responding. That's all that process is. Now, what about this one? And this is where it does feel like it's a bit of a trick question, because you're like, okay, well, everything else was conversation, but this one's not a conversation. There's no conversation happening here. And if you're thinking that that's okay, because I did too, but that's not true. There is a very real conversation that's happening here. There is still listening and responding. There is still listening and responding. It's that she's having the conversation with the website now, and the website's having a conversation back. And in reality, what's actually happening in most digital sites, maybe yours, is that there's very little listening going on, but there's a whole lot of responding. So you create your website, you create your store, your funnels, your customer journeys, whatever they are, and you're constantly promoting yourself, which obviously the website's supposed to do. But how do you know if you've got it right? Right? How do you know how to get to this point? Like if you had a salesperson, if you could talk to somebody, and some of you have models like this, where you're speaking with a customer, like this mastermind's a great aspect of that. Brian would, help have a conversation to encourage the value and then get you ultimately into the mastermind group. But the concept here is that you're trying to have a conversation. You need to have a conversation because you don't know if what you're saying is going to work. You don't know what objections maybe are coming up unless you can have that conversation. So how do you make this something more like this, right? How do we actually do that? And when you've got a site that looks like this, you still need to make sure that you've got listening and responding going on. And the biggest part of that is the listening thing. How do you listen when you're not there? How do you listen when it's just the website? And this is the trick. This is the aha moment for me. Is measurement is how we listen. So if you've ever wondered about measurement, you're thinking it's just about the users and your conversion rates and cart value and everything else you hear everybody else talk about all the time when it comes to numbers and your eyes kind of go cross-eyed. I get all that, and that is not untrue. All this stuff is useful, but this is the key. This is why measurement exists. It's how we listen to their side of the conversation. And then marketing is how we adjust our conversation to keep the conversation going the direction we want. Right? So listening is their side of the conversation. That's measurement. Marketing, that's our side of the conversation. And our job is obviously to adjust our side of what we're asking to say back to them so we can keep the conversation going the direction we want. Ultimately, in most cases, that's to some sort of transaction. Now, measurement marketing, of course, is our company. It's how we got the name, measurementmarketing.io. And so at this point, I want to just do a quick one thing check. If already you've had that one thing where you're like, okay, we have to start listening to the conversation. Just being aware that that's happening is a big deal for a lot of people. They haven't thought about their website having a conversation with a salesperson or with a customer. In my head, my background, I was talking with Mike in our breakout room. He was mentioning he was in radio. I actually came in through radio as well, sales management as well. So I always think about the sales pipeline and managing salespeople and making sure the pitches are down and what they're saying to get the customer to move through the journey, right, through the pipeline. And website for me is a salesperson. Every single page on that website is a salesperson. And if I just hired a bunch of salespeople and then threw them out into the market and say, go convert prospects and never manage them, I would not have great results. But as digital marketers, we do it every day. That's kind of the rule. So people do. They don't listen. So they don't know how to train this website. And so they don't know how to change and adjust the website so they get better results from it. So again, if that hasn't occurred to you, we're like, okay, we didn't. And again, that's no fault. Like it didn't occur to me either for years. But then I realized, there's a conversation happening. We can measure for that conversation. That's going to make me a much better marketer because I actually understand what they're saying in a way. So we'll talk more about how to actually get that done through the framework in just a little bit. So with the mindset out of the way, and hopefully at this point you're going, cool, I get listening to the conversation is important. Let's talk about the superstorm that we are all in right now. This is in my head, in very real world, in the scenario, especially when it comes to measurement, this is what the scenario is. This is it. This is my favorite photo because it encapsulates everything that's going on. There's massive changes. There's a lot of wind and scary sounds and noise, and it's constant in this world of measurement. It is constant. Things are changing so quickly all the time. How do you actually hang on to it? Well, first, let's talk about what exactly is going on. There are three, what we call the superstorm, right? But they're made up of three separate storms. The first one is there is a lot of changes in tech. This is where Apple and Facebook got into their tiff last year, but that was just a public one because Facebook thought, I think they could probably adjust a little more than they could, and flexed and made the world, freaked out the world. But Apple's been doing this stuff for years. That was just how it affected Facebook last year. So Facebook sort of made it a thing, but it's been going on for years. Where Apple with Safari, the browser for Apple, is stopped doing third-party cookies. Chrome in a few years is going to stop doing third-party cookies. That's going to make it harder to measure things. That's why Facebook's freaking out when the opt-in stuff happened, where it's like, hey, I don't want to be tracked, But the do not track stuff's been going on for years. There's so much of this is happening with tech. And what's happening is tech is the road, right? We use other people's browsers, other companies' browsers. You've got browsers like Brave that are out there that you can use that basically eliminate measurement. You can't be measured if you're using Brave, and more people are using that stuff every day. This is going to continue. And every day, because of tech alone, you're going to be measuring less. You're not going to see everybody in your stores. You just won't, because you're not going to be able to measure for it. And in reality, this is just something we have to sort of go, okay, well, we're used to this world where at least we thought we could measure everybody all the time doing anything we ever wanted. And this was the world that we thought we were in. It's not entirely true, but it felt like that. Now we are at a realization where that's not the world. We definitely know that's not the world. You're not going to be able to measure every single thing that everybody's doing all the time, but you probably can measure a decent enough chunk. So even though the tech is making it harder to measure, it's going to be okay, right? And for the framework, I'll show you why that framework will help with that. That's just the tech storm, which again, will continue to get worse as tech evolves, Chrome being the next big one, probably in a couple of years. Then you've got this, you've got laws. Now, GDPR is the most famous one out of Europe. So you've got data and privacy laws. California's got theirs, Brazil's got theirs, the US will certainly have theirs. Every single country is going to have something around privacy. That is just going to be a thing. So it will get worse when it comes to that. And by that, I don't mean to degrade laws. They are needed in this case, because what's happening is data moved from in a process of moving, I should say, from the company, like in this case, let's say Facebook, saying, hey, we can get to collect anything we want. We can do whatever we want with your stuff, right? Where essentially the user is the product and they just don't care about that. They want to, that's their model. Now it's that data is retaining ownership with the users. So now it's, oh, I'm on Facebook, but that's my data. I'm allowing you to use it and I can take it back at any point. That's the switch. And that's the fight that's happening right now. That's where these laws are really pointing to, is putting data back in charge, where it's the ownership isn't the company that collected the data that owns it. It's the customer that owns it. And the customer can define who does what with what, right? And including, I don't want you to have any of my data anymore, get rid of it. Like that's the stuff that's happening. Again, this is just going to continue, which means data at a certain point, you're going to lose it. It's going to be less of it to measure, right? And this can be scary, especially if you're used to thinking we need to measure everybody all the time. Right? And the good news about this is you don't, but it is something to just be aware of. Like, there's going to be more laws that come out that make it harder to measure people. The third storm, and this is the biggest one, is absolutely this: the users. We've got our users that are out there. So they've been installing ad blockers. Maybe you have some on your own Chrome browser, or whatever browser you're using, an ad blocker that keeps you from being measured. You've got all this, choices like Brave, we talked about earlier, the being able to, I'm not going to use Chrome anymore, I'll use Brave. I don't want to use Firefox or Mozilla or whatever. I'll use, some other browser that automatically blocks stuff. Users just don't want to be measured because it got a little creepy, went over the top, right? And it's, again, as an industry, we probably pushed it too far for sure. But it's where we are. This horse is not going back in the barn. Users don't want to feel like we're measuring every single thing they do all the time. Right? Which is not to say that everybody feels like that. And that's the most important part. Some don't care. Many don't care, but there are some that do. And there will be more that will. And so that's the point, is that you're going to be able to measure, again, less in the future, not more. This is why rethinking measurement and how we think about it, switching from we get to measure everybody doing everything all the time to we just have to, change how we think about this, because we're walking into a world, we're already in a world, and we're walking more in through it, which will happen for 2022, 2023 and beyond, that we're going to have less data. But we're still going to have to make decisions as marketers. So if we have to listen to the conversation, how are we going to be able to effectively do that, right? To measure their side of the conversation if the superstorm is happening. And if you're wondering, okay, where are we in all this whole superstorm thing? Where are marketers? We're this right here. We're sitting here going, okay, let's batten down the hatches and hope we can figure this thing out. So the idea is that it is getting harder to measure. Remember, it doesn't have to be harder, but it is getting harder. So I'm going to talk about the framework that you can use that'll make it much easier for you. But if you keep doing what you've done in the past, for sure, it's going to get harder. You're going to see things falling off. You're going to see big giant holes in the conversation. You're not going to be able to understand kind of what's going on to the level that you could before. So you will have to adjust how things are done. Measurement.
Hey, Mercer.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Mercer, just a quick thing. I
Sure.
think you're going to get to it, but how much of this is attribution to a particular source? Like if you have a marketing campaign, I mean, this has been going on, when Guthrie Ranker spoke at the Titans event in 2014, they were on an infomercial with kiosks, with online, and they were like, it was like all the gestalt of everything they were doing, and they had to make decisions. I assume you're going to get there, but I just wanted to know how much of this is about attribution in addition to just getting the measurement down to
attribution,
the best number.
Great question. So attribution is an aspect of measurement. We will get to that when we go into the framework. Good. So we'll talk more about that there and why that's important and how to actually go about doing that. But it's an aspect of measurement. And the challenge is most people jump into attribution first and try to figure it out, which is kind of swinging the hammer, hoping that you're eventually just going to build a house from it. Why it's important to understand measurement overall top down is because the attribution will get easier when you understand measurement and kind of why.
That makes perfect sense, because I know we've had a lot of people in this group and a lot of people who I've coached who start at measurement and they get lost and they either abandon an advertising program because they can't attribute it exactly to that spend.
Yep.
And I think it's often a mistake.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we'll talk about, again, the framework's going to help solve those issues for sure. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mercer.
Yep. Great question. So the other thing when you're switching around how you're thinking about this stuff when it comes to measurement is people think that, and I did too. Again, I did too. So this is an evolution of how this goes. When I initially started, I thought, I'm just going to set up my goals in Google Analytics, and once I do that, then I'll be able to use that thing. Like measurement's done. I just get to look at the reports now, right? But it's not that. Measurement is ongoing project. It's not a one and done project. It's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing skill. The way that I think about this in my own organization is measurement is a department. Whenever I build out, and we have multiple brands, measuremarketing.io being one of the primaries, but we have measurement as a department in our organization. When we are discussing a new customer journey, measurement is at the table. We've got our measurement team lead at the table, giving, not because she's going to come up with great ideas for a headline, though that might be the thing. That's not her job. But it's to make sure that the customer journey that we're building out, or that sales funnel idea that we're coming out of, that new offer, she's coming with measurements perspective saying, well, here's how we can know if this is working or not. This is how we know if this conversation that we're having, that we think we're having, is the conversation we're actually having. And so measurement helps define our customer journeys, right? Very important, because we can't just put them out there and then look at the amount of revenue and then be like, if it worked, okay. But if we don't know how it worked or how it didn't work, we don't know what actions to take. So having measurement up front, thinking about measurement further ahead in your customer journeys when you're actually planning things out, super important.
Can I just put an exclamation point on that for this group? Because it's a brilliant point. We had a guy speak who built $100 million business in direct marketing, selling. Well, it doesn't matter. So he has a great business, and he was talking about how he built it. And he said one of the biggest leverage points that he got in his business was the day he realized that his number two person in the company was not his CFO. It was not his financial guy, because this guy's a marketing guy. Mm-hmm. It was not his financial guy, but it was his analytics guy. And which I think keys right into measurement as a department, that to have a guy who's an entrepreneur building a direct response marketing business saying that the number one person in his company is not the guy doing the money counting, but the person doing the measurement was like, it was a blow-away moment for me. I don't know about the rest of the room, and you just blew the room away with that. So thank you, Mercer.
No, that's perfect. I appreciate that. The other thing is, this is a trend that's starting to happen. Everyone's probably heard this by now, first-party data. That's what this slide's about. So basically, that means that you're collecting the data. We're very quickly moving into a world where we're not going to be able to rely on Facebook to say, you just tell me who you want and we'll take it from there. We need to be able to hold that data. We can't just rely on Facebook to have it, because at a certain point, they're not gonna be able to share some of that. And that's already started happening with like the Apple stuff that happened last year. So for people that have their own data sets, their own audiences that they're building and that sort of stuff, that's why first party data is so important. So again, just from a mindset, there's no real actionable things you have to worry about necessarily today on that stuff. Just remember, that's why measurement exists. So measurement is so that you can collect your information, and it's your information. If you choose to share some of that with Facebook, that's awesome. But you're not using Facebook pixels to send information to Facebook. It's your data that you're sending, maybe through the pixel, but you're sending it to Facebook, but it's your data, right? You have that control over it. And that's what the first party data thing means. The other thing, and we're going to talk a lot about this, so don't worry about gathering this now, but I'm emphasizing it here because it's going to be talked over and over and over and over again during the rest of this presentation, which is results and how. We already kind of mentioned it, where it's like, if you throw out a sales funnel and it works, like that's awesome. Let's say you get great results. A lot of our students and clients get that. They give Facebook $50 and Facebook kicks out $150 in revenue, and they give Facebook $150 and Facebook kicks out $500 in revenue. They give Facebook $500 and Facebook keeps it. And then they go, well, what happened? And the problem is they had a curse of a good offer. It worked so well, they just kept scaling. They didn't ask how it was working or why it was working. They didn't understand the conversation that was going on. They were just so happy. And this is the most dangerous phrase you can ever utter as an entrepreneur, in my opinion, is the I don't care as long as I'm making money is the most dangerous phrase ever, because you certainly will care when you don't. And then what will happen is you look around and say, well, why didn't it work? And everyone's like, I don't know. What broke? I don't know, because nobody was measuring for it. So yes, you got to know your results, which is revenue, number of units, all that stuff, but you got to know how you're getting those results or how you're not. Right? Either way, you got to know how you're actually making that happen. And we'll talk about that because framework's going to help with that as well. The overall idea is that as an organization, whether you're a freelancer working for yourself or you've got a team, is your organization has to have some sort of measurement muscle. So it doesn't have to be a ton, but it does have to be some, and you've got to be aware of that. It's just a necessary thing. It's like you can't have you can't be an online business without a hosting, right? It's just one of those things. You have to have hosting. There's no way around it. It's how it's done. Same thing with measurement. You have to have measurement muscle in your organization. At least it's got to have a little bit in there. Again, you don't have to be a specialist in it, but you got to have at least that mindset where it's like measurements are part of this. And that helps us.
Thanks for listening to the Timeless Marketing Podcast with Brian Kurtz. Visit briankurtz.net and click podcast at the top of the page for a full transcript and show notes. If you're interested in working with Brian personally inside of Titans Accelerator, go to briankurtz.net/help to see how Titans can help you grow and scale your business. That's briankurtz.net/help.